Hi you guys, my name is Olivia. Thanks for joining me in another video. I'm a stay-at-home mama to 3 kiddos. I homeschool my 10-year-old son and my 6-year-old daughter. I also have an almost 5-month-old daughter, and I share homeschool things and lifestyle things. Today I am going to be discussing the Singapore Primary Mathematics US edition. I know that right now is kind of like curriculum perusing time. If it's not perusing time, a lot of people have probably purchased curriculum already, but I did want to get this out for those of you who may not have purchased anything yet, are still deciding what to do this upcoming school year for your kiddos for math. And I do feel like I don't see a lot of people choosing the primary edition of Singapore Mathematics. This is like the OG old school one, the one that was most like the Singapore method that this math program was developed by decades and decades ago. This is the US edition, and mostly I see a lot of people doing Dimensions or the new primary 2022. So if you go through Singapore Math, what your options are, you have the Dimensions, which is kind of like their I think Singapore Online calls it their flagship. There's a Common Core edition for people who need a math program that follows the Common Core standards, and then there's also the Primary Edition 2022 that came out 2022, the Primary US edition, which is the one that I use. Then there is a Standards edition, and all of them are really similar. They follow a lot of the same principles as far as like how they apply math. It's tricky when you try to move from one of the programs to another program, depending on the age group. It's going to be really difficult to move from 2022 to another one of them as far as like the seamlessness of it. But I mean, we have moved between completely different companies and curriculum of math before and made it work just fine. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with it, and then I'm going to discuss kind of the differences in the different Singapore programs. And then I also have a flip through of the curriculum and do discuss how I set up a lesson and how I move through those things. So I don't see a lot of flip throughs on the Primary US edition, and I don't know if that's because people have already looked through it and done some sample pages or what have you, like through Singapore's website, and you've just decided it's not for you, which is totally fine. There's tons of programs that are not for us. Or if that's because there's just not that great or in-depth of a look inside of the curriculum itself, and so you just can't, you don't feel like you can make an informed decision on purchasing it, because a lot of people use Dimensions, and because the Primary US edition is older, I wonder if they're just there's just not as many updated flip throughs or look insides for this curriculum. And so I would like to show you guys inside the curriculum so that if you're interested and you want to kind of compare with what you've seen through some of the other options, you actually can get a look inside of it. All right, so we were formally, like our very first year, we were using a spiral program for math, which I don't hate or despise, it just didn't work for us. So we moved on to Singapore, which is a mastery program. And when I was looking up different maths to try to move on from that one, this is one in all of those, the mom blogs of yore from the homeschooling communities. This was one of those ones that was almost always included as one of those tried and true, like you get really good solid math results using that one. And so then I looked through the different primary options. Remember, 2022 was not available yet, and Dimensions was not available yet. And the US edition just really stood out to me. And then we purchased it, and it worked really great. It really solidified all of those foundational things that, especially in the year that we tried this his second grade year for my oldest, and that was our first year with it. And that's a big year for multiplication and division and like place value and that sort of thing that are really hammered in that year. And it has been, I mean, I'm not gonna say we never come up against things where he's like, I don't want to do math, like, or that like a subject is tricky or what have you. But when we were using that loop schedule, he did not retain a lot of the information that we learned and went through. So I've been really happy with this program. Now, when Dimensions dropped, Dimensions is beautiful and it is colorful where this program is not. So you'll see this more in the flip through. The workbooks are in black and white, which it's like no frills and it's not distracting. The first grade textbook has a lot more color, and then the color starts being removed the higher up you go in the program. So my example from today is primary 4A. So you're gonna have an A and a B for, I think all the programs have A and B. So it's basically semesters. They split up your math in semesters. This one has a little bit of blue shading in it. The theme for this year is blue. So some of it's gonna be blue. And so when Dimensions came out, I was like, oh, there's so much color. Maybe it'll be more engaging. Not that we were even having problems with this, but I think a lot of educating mamas would agree that when a new curriculum drops, you look through it because you don't know what you could possibly be missing out on. If something, you didn't realize something might be another way that your learner learns better. And so I did look at it, and I looked at it for that year and also the next year. And I was like, a lot of people are using Dimensions. Well, then I started seeing some other things coming out. First of all, let me just preface with, most of the people that I see who choose Dimensions love Dimensions and they continue on with it. For those videos that I have seen of people saying they're moving on from Dimensions, I listened to what they were saying about it, and a lot of people were saying there's so much work, there's a lot of problems per lesson, and it got kind of exhausting for my kiddo, and there was just so much to do. And when I looked through flip throughs of it, I was noticing that there was a lot of work, and it made me stop and think, because I was like, I don't think there's all that much work for us. And so I looked into our program, and then through the flip throughs of the Dimension program, there are samples on Dimension's website. So when I was looking through it, I was like, oh, there really is a lot more for Dimensions. Now you can be a Dimensions using family and just decide not to assign all of the problems. And I think that I do that with all of my curriculum that I give my kiddos. You know, I'll look at something, I'll be like, I don't really think it's necessary for you to do this, or we're gonna skip that. I don't think that that's necessary. So just because it says this is the workload for the day does not necessarily mean you have to do that. I do have to say, the US edition is much more condensed. So if that's something that you've heard too, that you're not sure if Dimensions would be the right choice for you because of how much work there is, just know that the US edition, and I can't speak for Common Core or the Standards edition because I've never used them, but as far as the US edition goes, it's much more condensed. And the work is, it's not so spread out, but there are still availabilities within the curriculum that it gives you to extend the work if you think you need more help. So what you get for each semester, so for each set, this is A, I have the home instructors workbook, and I have the student workbook. This is what they write in, and this is what they do all their work in. And then I have the textbook. In the flip through, you'll see a little bit closer about what is the difference between the textbook and the home instructor's guide. And then there's some practices and reviews that we use kind of like quizzes or tests, though I don't weigh them that heavy, like a quiz or a test like you would, we can imagine probably from public school. I just don't think that's beneficial for my learner in our home right now. But there are options for practice quizzes and tests in the textbook. There's also some reviews in the workbook. And then in some of the instruction, it will say if this is something that you think you need more practice on, there is in the instructor's guide a section called mental math. And mental math is just some more kind of like work pages of just rote practice, of just going over and really kind of ingraining plug and chug sort of things on topics that if you think your kiddo needs a little bit more help in, they can. This program also offers a supplementary workbook for more practice sheets. I've never felt that that's necessary. I feel like the instruction is really clear and it's concise and it's straightforward. And I think that there is enough work in the workbook and through the textbook and through those practices and the reviews that you do get some good assessment and you do get some good practice, and that I don't think that I would purchase that. Now, he is technically moving into his 5th grade year, though we're doing not just 5th grade work, but as he finishes up the 5th grade workbook and moves into the 6th grade workbook, I am open to purchasing that if he does then need it with some more advanced work. Or if you're someone who really wants to use this course book, but you think your learner may need more practice, I like that that's available. I just didn't think that it was necessary for us. So let me kind of talk to you about the differences in the different programs. So for the dimensions, like I said, there's a lot more color, so it's really beautiful. For some people, they say that's engaging, and some of the other people were saying like why dimensions is not working out for them anymore have mentioned that they think sometimes for their learner it was distracting. I think that's a really personal thing. For some people it works and some people it doesn't make a difference, so it wouldn't matter. And then Dimensions also has, I think there's a video subscription option, or maybe it comes with your purchase, I'm not sure, but there is video option in some sort of capacity for Dimensions as well. So for Dimensions and the primary US, like how we use, they say use these ones if your learner is pretty competent in math. I would say my kiddo is competent in math, though he's not like a whiz. He's going into 5th grade, but he hasn't like already completed the 6th grade year. So it's not like he's above and beyond in his capabilities for math, but he generally understands it. I do have to say that a lot of that was developed through the foundational learnings of using this mastery approach and this program specifically. And they also say that the Singapore Dimensions is going to be their most affordable program, with all of the resources that are already built in, because like I said, they say that there's a lot more work in the Dimensions option than there is in the US edition for the primary. For Dimensions, it also says this will work really well for you if you're mostly competent or confident in your competency in teaching the math skills that they're going to present you with in that program as well, or at least willing to kind of like dive in and feel comfortable learning it through their guides to then teach it to your learner. And then Dimensions also has like a more challenging problem option too, and they say that those ones can be pretty tough. Obviously, if you don't think that you need that, you can still purchase Dimensions and just not assign those problems. And then Dimensions also covers a lot more of the Common Core standards as well in their teachings. The reason we went with this program was because we were using a loop, like a spiral program, and he hadn't retained what he learned, and so we stepped back and we bought this program, and now he very much understands and has ability to complete this math. So I think even if you have a learner where things just weren't clicking with another program, if you're interested in the primary US edition, that this could probably still work for you. And I think it's worthwhile to print out the sample pages and see what a lesson looks like for you guys. So this US edition is also the one that has the shortest lessons and the shortest amount of work available. Like I said, you can still purchase the workbook that has extra practice in it. I don't feel like we've needed to. We have been able to move on from unit to unit, and then in the reviews and the practices, he has still understood what it was that we went over, and he hasn't lost anything that he's learned even from year to year. And also, if you are not concerned with Common Core standards, this program would not apply to Common Core standards if that's something you're worried about, because this Singapore was not created for US standards. So they do teach US, not everything's in metric, but there is a lot of metric work, which I think works really well, especially coming from, like, my background is in science, and we had to do a lot of math for that too. And it's really easy to apply in sciences with the metric system because you're going to be using a lot of metric with your science application as well. So that's pretty seamless, though I do think that it's important to learn some imperialized systems, the unit of measurement as well. They do teach like gallons and quarts and ounces and that sort of thing. It's not all in grams or kilograms, so they do back and forth with it. They say that 2022 is there and available for kiddos who have like all abilities in math, but if you do have a struggling learner, this one may be a better approach for you, especially because they don't go as in depth when it comes to abstract learning of math in the 2022. And the 2022 is much more scripted, and it only covers topics that would be necessary for US standards for US schools. And you're gonna cover those a lot more in depth than, I guess, what the primary US edition or Dimensions is going to teach you. Now, in the samples I have seen, I haven't seen an example of that, like what the difference of that would be as far as like diving into what you would need for US math versus a math program that could be applied internationally, I suppose. I haven't seen that in the samples. I think it's just different kinds of work, and what they have available for you to look at. It's just kind of different kinds of work, but following a lot of the same options. The scope and sequence of primary 2022 is going to be different than kind of like what Dimensions and the other primary options kind of run a little bit parallel, and 2022 is a little bit different. So that's why they say if you're doing 2022, it would be kind of hard to jump into than the other primary options or Dimensions. So there's really deep conceptual understandings that are applied through the whole Singapore, like the whole program in general for any of the curriculum options. And it really does want to develop fluency, math fluency. And I have seen that with the US edition. I really love how condensed it is and precise, and it's no fluff, but there is options to extend if you need, that I think. But if you don't, and you just kind of want something that's going to be condensed and clear and forward, I've really enjoyed our math, the US edition, the primary US edition. So for the other two primary options that I didn't really touch on about a whole lot, the standards edition is meant to be, I guess California revamped what their state standards were supposed to be for math, and it does ask for some more Common Core stuff. So the standards edition is supposed to be more aligned with what California has deemed necessary for what they want completed in a math curriculum, and then the Common Core is redeveloped to apply the Common Core standards within their curriculum. So yeah, hopefully that kind of described a little bit about what you can expect from the differences in the math and why we really enjoy the primary US edition. And I am going to jump into the flip through right now. Here is Singapore Mathematics, the primary mathematics US edition. This, I'm going to give you an example 4A. So the booklets come with 4A and 4B. So you're going to have two sets for a year's worth of school. What I have here is the textbook, the home instructor's book, and then the workbook. So what I do when I set up a lesson is I go to the home instructor's guide. For example, I'm going to use the last unit. So the last unit of this guide, this is unit 6, perpendicular and parallel lines. What it's going to do is it has these little symbols here so that you can know what the home instructor guide is telling you. The light bulb is objectives. Notes to the instructor providing added explanation of concepts. This is the instructional ideas or suggested activities. These are ideas for games to reinforce concepts. This is where you would find the corresponding textbook pages and the learning tasks, and then this would be the homework assignments. So here, this is the objective. And then here, there's not a whole lot of instruction from the guide itself. Like here is an example from the angles chapter. And this is kind of you explaining things from the instructor guide. So like it says here, the instructional ideas. This is you explaining it from an instructor's guide. This one just has you learning right, which is pretty understandable when it comes to parallel and perpendicular lines. You kind of need to be able to see that in person. So here's the textbook. So it tells me pages 78 and 79. I'm going to turn to pages 78 and 79. Here's perpendicular and parallel lines. Here is some explanation that you would be talking to your kiddo about. And then there's the learning tasks down here. So we're chatting through, we get to learning tasks. Here's some more chatting to reinforce what it was that you were just talking about. And then number 1 would be learning task 1. And it helps walk you through some examples here in the textbook and then gives you the workbook exercise that correlates. So then I'm going to open up the workbook. This says workbook exercise 45. So here is workbook exercise 45. Obviously, with parallel and perpendicular lines, this doesn't have a whole lot of written math in it, but there is room if you are doing a math subject that has to do with some space. It gives room in here for you to complete all of that work. This exercise just has a front and back. So then the next day we've completed, and it tells you here also in the instructor guide, once you've completed the learning tasks, to move on to exercise 45, it tells you to move on to exercise 45. The next page, it will tell you even on here where you're going to be learning this in your textbook. Page 80. Here's some learning tasks. Here are your learning tasks. Here's an instruction, draw some lines and points and have your student construct a perpendicular line through the point. So this is something that you and your student can do together on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper. Move on to the learning task. Here's the learning task 3. It helps you work through it here. Suggests doing workbook exercise 46. It correlates here in the textbook. So then you're going to do workbook exercise 46. This one is also front and back. It has you doing that for several more. So here's some more parallel lines. Here's some work here. All of that red was my son scribbling. He wasn't even wrong. So anyway, so now let's move on to Unit 7. So there has not been any practices or reviews given. Those are given after a set chunk of units. So here's Unit 7, area and perimeter, using rectangles and squares. So this is just some notes for you, the parent, to kind of take in. This is not any instruction. Page 84 is in the textbook. Well, again, here are the objectives that you're going to be learning here. Page 84 in the textbook. So here's some instruction, and then number 1 is the learning task that correlates here with the learning task. This is for you to walk through the instruction with some more notes for you to talk it through with your learner. So this has several instruction here. This is a more in-depth concept. Lots of practice. So when you go onto your workbook, it says workbook exercise 49. Here's workbook exercise 49. They have really clear instructions here. They have pictures that you learn through. Here's where the space that it gives you to show some work. Most of them are front and back. There are some times when there's multiple pages, but for the most part, it's a pretty short and concise option. So going back to this one, it has you learning this in lots of different ways. Here, it gives you another reminder about going over square numbers when like you multiply something by itself. So we go on through all of the exercises, and then workbook exercise 52. So you complete through workbook exercise 52. My son was scribbling, he's not wrong. So then, like here, we turn the page that says review 4. Here in the teacher's guide, it does not say anything about review 4 yet. So we're gonna turn the page, and here are the answers for the practice. The practice is something that you're gonna find in the textbook on pages 91 through 93. So let me pull out that textbook. So as we can see, it correlates here too. The last workbook exercise before you saw that review said 52. So we ended workbook 52 and it says practice 7A. It says to do the practice 7A. So this is something that my son would do in his own workbook. This does not like give space for the answers or anything like that in the text. So that's when we use our School Nest mathematics notebook. This is the half-inch graph option. They have a bigger option than this too. So here's my son's work for that. As you can see, I think that this is plenty of space to be able to work out multiplication, draw shapes if you want to. He did not use the lines of the grid, though I think that that's a good idea to do, but whatever works for him. And I like that the grid is really light colored. I know this is not a review of video for the School Nest notebook, but if you're looking for a notebook to put your math work in, this is one that I highly recommend. I like that the grid color is lighter, so your pencil still shows up really nice and clear. So he goes through practice 7A. This would be the end of practice 7A because this is review C. So here are the answers in the instructor's guide for practice 7A. And then in the instructor's guide, it says to do review C. Review C is in the text. So this is pages 94 through 96. So this review C is going to be a review of everything that they've covered thus far. So this is a pretty hefty one. This I would definitely give lots of time for. Sometimes I even split these into two for my kiddo. It just depends on what else I want him to accomplish that day. If I'm able to just let him not really do a whole lot else and then focus on math for the day, or if we need to get through some different things, I do half and half. So then we've completed the textbook. Here are the answers for that review C. We're going to turn the page, and then it tells you to do workbook review 4. So this is just another way of assessing. Obviously do as much or as little as you want to do, but here's the review 4. This is also going to go over everything thus far that they have learned. And then you're done with the workbook. Let me do a little flip through here of the home instructor's guide and how it's set up. So you're going to go ahead and open this up. It shows you these different symbols that you will see throughout the text. It gives you an overview here of what you're going to learn for each unit. It's going to give you the answers to the workbook exercises. So here's the student workbook, all the exercises 1 through 52. It also gives you the review pages that you will find in the text as well, and then answers to mental math and the appendix. It has a weekly suggested schedule. I have never used this, but this is a suggested schedule for how you can set up your day if you like to plan ahead this way. It gives you some examples of some different things that you could have to help with instruction for your kiddo, like a base 10 set, some number discs, a hundreds chart, that sort of thing. It goes right into instruction. I'm going to flip to the answers. So these are the answers to the workbook exercises and reviews. So everything that you're going to find in your workbook is going to be here. Once you get to the end of the exercise answers, and I like too that this explains for a lot of it, the work that you should do to get to where you're at. All right, these are the answers to mental math. It will suggest sometimes in some of the instruction, if your child needs further instruction or practice, do mental math this number, do mental math that number. So here are the answers to it. The mental math is actually behind here in the appendix. So we've got some plus and minus. We've got some like further with bigger numbers, plus and minus. We've got some multiplication, some bigger division here. We've got some fractional work. Here is some place value number cards that you could use. Like I just photocopy these and use them with our work. Here's a hundreds chart, numbers line, some graph paper if you do not have graph paper of your own. Here's like a bingo chart for one of the games. We've got some fraction circles. You can make copies of these, fraction bars. So there's a lot in here to help you even if you don't have outside resources. And the textbook is just set up to, here's your table of contents for each of the topics you'll cover, and it goes right into instruction. This is also no frills. I personally would not use the system without these two. Some people use just the textbook, and you very well could, but then you'd have to be grading your own workbook, which, I mean, it's math that I can grade, but I could just go ahead and use the answers here. I think it's way easier, and it has further instruction, which I think is really helpful because you never really know how much instruction your kiddo is going to need on any given topic, and I like that it helps walk you through it if you don't feel comfortable just looking at the text. There are some things, like especially with the perpendicular and the parallel lines, that I had my son, because it would have been easier in that moment had he be able to do it by himself, where I was like, hey buddy, read through this text and then do your workbook. I will check your workbook afterwards. Let me know if that was easy or hard for you. And he was able to do this on his own without me using the instructor guide. So that is a look through what you're gonna get with the actual books. This obviously is consumable. We write directly in this, but these two I bought used and they last and held up really well, even with the soft binding. Okay guys, I really hope that that one was helpful for you. And I did try to cover everything that I think would have been important to see, so that when you go forward and if you're interested in one of the Singapore options, you have a better in-depth look into the primary US edition. Because like I said, I don't see a lot of flip throughs on that. If there's anything I didn't cover or any questions you guys have on the program, don't hesitate to reach out, ask me something in the comments. If you're in one of the other Singapore curriculums and you're considering moving to another math program, but you haven't considered primary US edition, let me know. I'd love to chat with you guys about it. And yeah, thanks guys so much. I will see you in the next video.